from my angle, you're a little down. If you can move your I don't know, just positioning, just you're a little bit low on the angle.
Yeah. Okay, Jake. We had a little bit of issue, and we just started. So
Oh yeah.
let's get this thing going. I just want to say this is the 52 must see movies and why they matter. On this episode, myself and Mr. Jake Maringoni are going to be talking about Trainspotting. How you doing, Jake?
I'm doing pretty good. Down here in Australia, it's 10 a.m. and happy to be here just to talk about one of my favorite films. Completely obsessed with this movie from a young age. And how you doing?
I'm doing great. Glad to have you on the show. This year we're going to be we moved over to from the Best Damn Movie Show channel, YouTube channel to Full Metal Media, and I'm going to be getting some new hosts, some new co-hosts, some guests, and so one of those new co-hosts and people that you're going to be seeing as a regular is Jake. So this is a film that he nominated. So we are going off the book. We are not doing the book. Season 1 was the book. We're on season 2, but thinking about it, there's more than just 52 essential films that you need to watch. So that's why we're doing season 2, and we're going to be talking about a lot of other modern films, and one of those is Trainspotting. So with that being said, I'm going to get into the cast here. One of the earlier roles for Mr. Ewan McGregor, he plays Mark Renton. Mark Renton, and then we got another guy that you might see on some TV around in America. I don't know about Australia, but Johnny Lee Miller plays a character by the name of Sick Boy, and Robert Carlyle, another American TV guy. He's been in other movies. But this is
He's worked with Danny Boyle before as well.
Say that again.
He's worked with Danny Boyle as well.
Yeah. And another guy that you may have seen recently last summer in Wonder Woman, Ewan Bremner plays Spud. And we also have Kelly MacDonald is Diane. You know her from, I think.
Brave.
Say that again.
She's in Brave. She was Merida, the voice in Brave.
That's right. And she's been in some other things as well. So we have an interesting cat. We have Kevin McKidd. You may know him from Rome. He's on something now. I don't know what he's on, but
he's on some show. Yeah, I know that what you're thinking of. I can't remember the name.
Me neither. But he's famous for being on Rome, which was a great show. 2 seasons on HBO. He plays Tommy, and we also have Shirley Henderson, who plays Gail, and then we have James Cosmo, Peter Mullen, Eileen Nicholas, and Pauline Lynch plays Lizzie. You may know Peter Mullen. He's been in a lot of different, most notably, he's in one of the last Harry Potter's movies, but he's in a lot of British movies, and he's been in some American stuff too. So James Cosmo is in, I believe, Braveheart, or he's in either Game of Thrones or Braveheart or something. I recognize him from somewhere, but and of course the director is Danny Boyle, an acclaimed director. He's been doing a lot of, sometimes he does big budget things, sometimes he does indie things, but he changes. He does science fiction, or he does a little movie where a kid finds a bunch of money, or he does Slumdog Millionaire and wins a bunch of Oscars, or he does a guy gets his arm stuck in a rock, 127 hours. So it's the gambit of Danny Boyle movies is kind of all over the place. And he's got another movie coming out. Then he's going to be doing James Bond number 25. So what do you think of the cast and Danny Boyle so far?
This is one of the best casted films in my opinion, because every character feels like they are the characters. Danny Boyle had seen John Lee Miller in the 1999 film Hackers, and he puts on a relatively okay American accent, and Boyle's like, I'm going to get him, and he's actually British, which is interesting because he puts on a really good Scottish accent, and it wasn't until I think the photo shoot after they had finished filming that Ewan Bremner had realized that he was British. So I think John Lee Miller is really, really good as Sick Boy, and then originally Ewan Bremner was actually Renton in the stage play for Trainspotting. But Boyle and the producer Andrew McDonald and writer John Hodge, they had already decided that they wanted Ewan McGregor to be Renton because they'd worked with him on Shallow Grave. And so they were like, what about Spud? And so he just perfectly fit that goofball, that just almost weird looking best friend who's almost kind of a loser with certain scenes that happen in the film. But they work so well. And then Robert Carlyle's Bigby, that's just one of the, so menacing, but also just so funny with what happens with him in that film. And you get scared every time he like pulls a knife or starts a brawl. It's crazy. And then Kelly Macdonald, I think that was her first film. It was her film debut. And she was only 19 when they shot that. And that worked well because nobody had known because in the film she plays a 15-year-old and nobody would know that she's 19. It kind of works well. And so I think that was good casting. And then, of course, she had a good career after that with Brave and No Country and all that.
Yeah.
So yeah, definitely a good cast. And then there's a small little cameo by Irvine Welsh, the writer of the original novel, as what's his name, Mickey Forster, the guy that gives Renton the suppositories at the beginning of the film.
That's right.
And so that's it. And I totally didn't know that on my first watch. It was only until I watched it a couple of times and I saw on the credits that I was like, hey, it's the guy that wrote the novel. So that was pretty cool. And I think that helps with the casting. But everybody fits their characters. And I every time I think of Renton, I think of Ewan McGregor. Every time I think of Spud, I think of Ewan Bremner, and so on and so forth. Everyone's just perfectly cast.
I know it's one of those. I just watched the film, and I'll tell you what, watching the film and seeing these actors in these roles, you're absolutely 100% right. I couldn't imagine anybody else playing these characters. They're all perfectly cast as these characters. And you're right, Irvine Welsh played Mikey Forrester, one of the drug guys in this film, but we'll get into it. All right, so let's get started here. The movie starts out with Mark Renton in narration, Ewan McGregor talking, and you see him running down the street. They're running, and then all the guys are kind of running behind him. A bunch of the guys are running behind him, and it's kind of weird because it's like, wow, that's a crazy way to start the film. These guys just running down the street, you know?
It puts you already in the film because usually there's a build-up or there's something that sets the world or sets the characters, but it's straight into the action and you have no idea what's going on. I think that works well for the film because it just keeps that kinetic pacing and it never lags after that.
Yeah. And then Spud goes for a job interview. I was just like, okay, where are we going here with Spud? You know, he tries to convince these people he's the right guy for the job, but they're like, you're already in the system. We know that you could get interviewed for the job. You didn't have to go do all this stuff to get into the interview. Then he acts all kind of weird how
they gave Renton gave him speed just before he went for the job offer because he was getting nervous. So, and that creates a situational humor, and it's pretty funny. Talks about pleasure and all that stuff. It's always just funny.
Yeah, it was. I mean, these guys are all just off the wall crazy. All of them. Then Big B, and this is what I'm kind of getting us used to the characters. Big B tells a story at a bar, and then Tommy tells the same story, but he tells it differently. It's like Big B's telling the story at a bar, and then this is how the story is supposed to go. So Tommy,
and knowing Big B, it's the Tommy story is correct because he just goes crazy over a guy just because he's eating a bunch of snacks trying to play a pool game. Is great. That scene kind of just fits who Big B is.
Oh yeah, you really get to know the character right away with the whole pool thing and everything.
And then just after that, he throws the glass over the side of the bar, and then it hits a woman, and she's bloody in the face, and he goes down and starts a brawl fight. Like there's nothing sane to this guy.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to bring up next. He just starts this brawl and hits the lady in the head, and his whole thing goes off the rails. You know, I mean, and this happens a lot in the film. This isn't the only time this happens.
Oh no, a couple more times.
Guy is a crazy person, you know. And in the club, Mark is just sitting there. He's just kind of like, oh, okay. And then he said, I'm going to get up and I'm going to go dance. And then all the girls he tries to dance with, like, oh,
Well, just to cut you there, sorry, before then, Ren decides to get off of drugs. Because originally, it's the first 10 minutes, you set it up montage style, the characters, they take drugs, that's their life, and then all of a sudden, Ren's like, okay, I'm going to stop taking drugs now. And so then we have one of my favorite scenes in the movie where he decides to have one more hit, the final hit, as he says, which is where he gets drugs from Mikey Forster, but he only has suppositories. He's like, oh, fuck. So he shoves them up his ass and then heads down, just walking, and then he realizes that he's no longer constipated because that's what heroin does to you. He's like, okay, I got to use the toilet. And unfortunately goes into the worst toilet in Scotland, which is just a disgusting toilet. Absolutely disgusting. Fun fact: they use chocolate to make it that disgusting, and that does not look pleasing or appetizing.
Yeah, that bathroom was pretty rough. That was a pretty rough bathroom. But you're right. He does decide he's going to give up taking drugs, but he goes one more time, and then he goes to the dance floor and he's trying to dance with women, and none of them want to dance with him. And then they're giving him looks and stuff. And then he looks across the room and he sees a girl in a nice, shiny, sparkly dress. And, one thing leads to another. He goes up to her and he's like, I'm in, he didn't say to her, but like in the narration of it, he's like, I'm in love. It's love at first sight. And so,
yeah.
And
then that leads them to, because she's leaving and then they go and then stuff happens.
Yeah. And, well, and all the guys end up with a woman out of this bar that night.
Except for Sick Boy and Begbie. Sick Boy was still at the club, but Spud and Tommy had
Yeah.
And all of it leads in disaster.
Oh yeah, I got it right down here. I got Spud meets a girl as well. Tommy meets a girl. And Mark goes back to Diane's place, and they all have some semblance of sex or try to have some semblance of sex. And what happens is Spud passes out. Tommy, for whatever reason, the girl he's with, is it Gail? Is he with Gail or is he with Lizzie?
No, it's Lizzie. Lizzie. Okay. Because they're both in a relationship and they both shot a
So he has to play a tape. She wants him to play a tape while they're having sex.
It's that sex video.
Yeah, sex video. But it ends up being a soccer match, and she's pissed off. And so she doesn't want to have sex with him after that because he lost the tape. He's like looking through all the VHS tapes and stuff. He's like, he can't find the tape. And then Mark, he does have sex with her. And Diane's like, well, you can't stay here. If you want to stay, you can sleep in the couch in the hallway. And he's like, oh, okay, great. And then the funniest thing is like a couple of them get up and they're with the families are all having breakfast.
Yeah. Oh,
come on, have some breakfast. And I'm like, what the heck kind of friggin' is going on here? They have sex with their daughters or whatever. And then it's okay.
They don't know. They don't know.
Yeah.
That's the thing. He's a friend of a friend, as he says. But then, of course, that leads to the discovery that Diane's actually still in school and that she's underage. Not good for Renton. And then it gets, I don't know if it's worse, but what happens with Spud and his breakfast?
Oh, God. So Spud, he wakes up and he notices there's something in the sheets. And it turns out he crapped himself.
He shat himself.
He crapped himself, and he takes the sheets. He comes out. He's like, no, I can't have breakfast. I need to go wash these sheets. And then the mother's like, no, I'll help you wash the sheets. And she's like,
my sheets, I'll do it. And
then crap gets all over the kitchen where they're eating breakfast. It's like, oh my God. It was like,
I was watching one time a couple years ago. I was watching this film with some friends because I had never seen it before, and we got up to that scene when it happened. Everybody like collectively we went, oh, like loud groan, and we were just, I was like, this is great. I'm glad that everyone's getting into it, and we all just had the same reaction. It was great.
Yeah, and you mentioned her, right? Diane is an underage schoolgirl because she comes out all dressed in her schoolgirl, and he's like, "Oh crap, what the hell?" All right, And then Tommy ends up getting nothing out of his deal. So because he couldn't find the tape. And then, of course, they all go on for a walk. It looked like moors. Did it look like moors to you? They were walking in the moors, like Scotland, and all these moors. That's what
I'm not really familiar with Scotland. I don't know. Well, they just went to like the mountain places, right? Because they took the trains.
It looked like a valley. That looked like there was some water there, and they went over like a little bridge. It looked like
a little bridge, yeah.
Scottish moors to me. I don't, who knows? Whatever.
It was the main point of that scene was that Tommy wanted to, and this is a good scene. It just kind of shows like the viewpoint of the characters. Is that Tommy's there just to see the Scottish significance and to feel proud, and Retton's just like, what's the point? Like Scottish are the worst of the worst, the scum of the planet, and all that stuff, and just going on about how they're nothing compared to everyone. And you kind of understand from his point of view, because Edinburgh just looks, a lot of it's very disgusting. There's nothing high class about it, and I think that's part of it why the film works, is that there's this just kinetic urban energy, and that's something that Danny Boyle has done like with Slumdog. So it's a running motif with him.
Oh yeah. I when they got out of the Edinburgh, I like when they went out to the moors and they went out.
Oh, like, London, yeah.
This is nice. Mark, of course, he decides, all this craziness, the stuff that's going on, he decides he's gonna get back on drugs again.
Same with Sick Boy and Spud. I think Sick Boy was trying to get off of just so he could prove that he was better than him, but yeah, they both went back on drugs.
And one of the things, this happens kind of twice in the movie. One of the things is Sick Boy starts talking about all the Bond women, and then he starts talking about how this one's okay and how this one's called Pussy Galore and what. I'm like,
the Honey Rider, yeah,
Bond expert or something. I mean, he knew more about James Bond. Say that again.
Sean Connery. He loves James Bond, and that's a part of his character, is that he's just a big pop culture fanatic. I mean, there's a scene earlier on in the film when him and Renton are at the park and they're shooting people with the BB gun, and there's a great scene where Renton shoots a dog and the dog attacks its owner, and I always laugh at that. But they are talking about just culture, and they're talking about like old artists like Iggy Pop and Bowie, and how they had really great success early, and then their later stuff, and even with Sean Connery about his Oscar for the Untouchables, just all that stuff, and that feels really modern, not modern, but it feels really real. Like it really does. It's just like everyday mundane dialogue. And
well, that's the thing about these characters. You could tell they're friends. You could tell that this is their life. This is like if we went to Edinburgh, we'd find 4 guys that were like this, and they would just be getting into trouble and doing normal crazy stuff. But you think about this, it's like there's probably 4 guys in every town and every state and every city and every country in America that have kind of like a relationship like these guys, 4 or 5 guys with all just bunch of trouble. Say that
everyone has a close relationship. Like everyone's a Renton or everyone's a Sick Boy, and when it comes to close friends, and I think like I've got a Sick Boy.
Yeah, I mean everybody's got a group of buddies that they just do. One's the crazy person, one's the calm person, one's the guy that kind of gets the rest of them kind of rallying them all together and get them all on the same page. One's the oddball. Everybody's got a group of friends like this. This is what's kind of interesting about these guys. Another scene where they stole a bunch of drugs and they used all the drugs.
Which is the first scene in the film, and they're running on the streets.
Yeah. They're running, and now we caught up to where we're at the beginning of the month, where they stole the drugs and they're like running away. But then a really tragic thing happens in the film, where Allison's just screaming. We just like out of nowhere, just Allison just starts screaming, and we're like, "Why is she screaming?" Well, then they pan over, and the baby's dead in the carriage that it was sleeping in, and we don't know why. We don't know what happened with the baby, but we know that it's Sick Boy's baby.
We realize at the end when he starts crying and everyone's just walking away and he's still there, and that's one of the best. That helps really like show Sitboy as a character, because usually before then we just taking drugs, talking about Sean Connery and Bond, and it was at that realize he kind of grew up, and I think even Renton says in voiceover that a part of him died that day, or just part of him changed.
And then they go back to the thing that they always do, and that's take drugs to get over the pain of the baby dying. You know, it's like that is like their fallback. They always go back to taking drugs. So then, you know, they're trying to keep doing what they do, steal things, take drugs, whatever. Well, guess what? They get caught. Mark and Spud get caught. And I mean, I don't think any of us saw this coming. When you're watching the movie, you don't see this coming, that Spud's going to end up going to jail.
Spud's the one that goes to jail.
Yeah, Spud
goes to jail,
Mark gets off. And it's like, well, why did Mark get? And they said, which we didn't, I didn't, you know, they didn't make it that clear that Mark was in rehab. I'm like, they didn't say that Mark was
and
in
he's still taking drugs.
But he was still taking drugs. So it was like, and it wasn't kind of, and then when Spud's mom shows up and he's like, "Oh, I'm sorry, man. I don't think, you know, I feel so bad. I didn't think I was going to get off, and Spud was going to end up in jail." And of course, then Big B like going off on Spud's mother. I mean, dude, come on, man. Her son just went to jail. Jeez, give her a break, you know. Then Mark relapses and gets
takes a shot, takes heroin again into that arm, and that's probably, I think, when everyone thinks of Trainspotting, it usually comes to the toilet scene and the overdose scene, because you have Lou Reed's Perfect Day plays, and that's probably the best juxtaposition ever, because he's definitely not having a good day, and he sinks into the ceiling, and it's a great shot, and then the drug dealer, Mother Superior, sees him, and there's like, "Oh, gotta get to the hospital for you," and then, of course, he
ends up getting the taxi to the clinic, and this is when his parents finally get involved in this, and they basically quarantine him at their house, and of course, he's having hallucinations,
nightmarish,
he's dreaming, he's having withdrawals. I mean, this is one of the best scenes I have ever seen. I've watched a lot of movies about drugs and drug abuse, and this is one of the best scenes I have ever seen about having withdrawal, of coming down off of a high and whatnot. And Ewan McGregor really sells
he really communicates,
he really sells it tremendously, and it takes a while, but finally they finally get him off, finally wean him off of it, and he's kind of starting to get into normal life, and they take him to go play bingo with them, the parents do.
There's a great time-lapse shot of him just staying still and everyone's moving around, and you can just tell that he's depressed.
Oh yeah, he when I've never taken drugs. I'm gonna put that out there right now. So I don't know, but I know I watched enough movies and TV shows, and I see what it can do to you, and I see the effects that it can have on you. I would never want to be in that situation that Mark was in right then, but in a lot of ways it helped him, because he kind of started straightening his life up. He started becoming like he was selling. We see him in a business suit.
He's selling apartments.
Yeah, he's selling apartments or condos or whatever he's doing. And before that, he goes and visits Diane to talk to her and tell her that he's not the way he was before, that he's kind of clean now. And so another thing showing us Big B's character is Big B bet on a really long shot horse, and the damn horse wins. And so then they.
Oh no, we're kind of a little bit out there, actually.
Okay, go ahead.
Because what happens is that then Renton's living a pretty stable life. He's starting to be happy, and then unfortunately, Big B commits a robbery, with a toy gun, and so now he's wanted, and so he's now hanging out at Renton's place.
That's
And
right.
so then he starts to get miserable and depressed, and then Sick Boy comes again because he becomes a pimp or a drug dealer, or I think he becomes both actually. And so now they're sleeping with him, and they sell his TV. They constantly annoy him. There's so much rubbish everywhere, and they're being a part of his life. And in fact, he tries to get them out by putting them in an apartment, but they won't pay rent. So back with him, and so unfortunately, there's nothing that Renton's just like really tired of it. And then of course Begbie gets on a horse and wins, and then they go out dancing.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I skipped right over that by accident. You're right. He's like, oh God, here are these guys one by one. They all come back to him, and they cause. What do they do? I mean, this is like a broken record with you and me talking about this. What do? They do stupid things. They make a mess. They get on drugs, or or rob somebody, or do something crazy. It's like,
yeah, it's crazy because and if we're talking about the dance, the disco, all that, there's a scene where earlier when Renton and Spud and Tommy they're trying to have sex and all that stuff, and then of course that leads in disaster. Same happens with Begbie.
oh yeah, Begbie ends up with a transvestite. He thinks he's got a hot baby. Turns out he's like reaching down there, and he's like, oh no, and he
gets paranoid and he goes crazy, and it's that just proves like how what kind of person Begbie is. It's like he's not into that sort of stuff. Like he's a man's man in his eyes.
Oh yeah,
so.
oh yeah, he really is a man's man. You're absolutely right. And this leads the guys to go back home because they don't show us what happened, but we find out.
They tell us.
They tell us. They tell us what happened in kind of like a flashback scene, a very quick. It does. It's not a long scene. No. That Tommy dies, and they have to go back for Tommy's funeral.
Yeah, he had because before then he was HIV because he went into drugs because Lizzie had left him, and so Ren had given him drugs, and then that of course led to him getting HIV. And he decided to rebuild his life by getting a cat for Lizzie, but Lizzie was like, nope. So he had to take care of the cat, but he just stopped and take care of the cat, and there was shit everywhere. And then unfortunately, he gets like an allergic reaction to the crap, to the poo, because for some reason, because HIV, it's it's some toxic plasmosis, because he gets some disease from the cat poo, so of course that causes him to die. He has like an allergic reaction, and then he of course dies, and then they go to his funeral, which is his death is caused by Renton, and that always bugged me when I first watched it. I was like, but Renton's the reason he died, but they bring it up in the sequel too.
Yeah, so I haven't seen the sequel. I was supposed to.
We might talk about it at the end. I might go into it at the end just because there's some interesting stuff about it.
Because I wanted to see it like 3 different times and just never did see it. I have the poster. I actually have the Trainspotting 2 poster. So then we get the author. Irvine Welch plays Mikey Forrester, and he comes across this deal about these guys and these Russians, and somehow they end up with these 2 kilos of heroin. And then they have to take and so they have to take the kilos and they have to do something with it. So Sick Boy brought them the kilos, and they're like, okay, what are we going to do with the we can get some money for the kilos. And so they set
because he sees the money involved. He realizes that this is a good opportunity. But because he needs money to get to, I think they need to get to London to do the deal.
Yeah, they have to go to London. Go ahead.
What happens is that Ren's like, no, I don't want to have anything to do with this. And of course, he has the most money. He has I think he has like £2. So everyone's like, Sick Boy and Begbie are like, well, we need you in this. And for some whatever reason, I think even Spud is part of it. I guess he needs money. He needs
Spud must have got out of jail somehow.
He gets out of jail at that time, yeah. And so then they all agree to. So Ren puts in money, and they all decide to go to London so they can do this deal. And then Yeah.
Yeah. So Mark's got the money, and so they all go. They take the train to London, and then he's got to try out the drugs at first to make sure that they work. And he's like, "Yep, they work, of course." So this means he relapses again.
He relapses again, and he gets caught in that addiction. And on the bus, he decides to take a. This is the great in his character because earlier they referenced the final hit, and this is like there's final hits, and then there's a final hits, and which one is this going to be? And so you see him taking one last hit, and Begbie's wondering what he's doing in the toilets, and then he comes out. And so we don't at that time that's the last time we see him take drugs, and so we don't know if it is the actual final hit.
Yeah, and so the deal goes down. I mean, you're thinking that there's something's going to go on in this deal, but nothing goes on in the deal. Everything's fine. The guy
they wanted 20 quick, but it was like, no, that's too much, and then they get it for
16,000 pounds. They end up getting for the 2 kilos of heroin, and everything's great. They're happy. They're all like jumping up for joy. They go out and party, and of course, wouldn't you know it again, Begbie gets bumped by a guy bringing some beers back to the table and starts a brawl in the bar. I mean, it's like a broken record with this guy. I mean, it's just crazy. And then
he pulls a knife out. He accidentally stabs Spud. He gets a cut, and then Sick Boy gets mad and angry, and then Renton's just sitting there, and there's this great shot where the shadows on half his face, and he's still got the money, and he's thinking, I could just take it and run. Because earlier, Sick Boy was like, oh, I could just take the money. And then Renton's like trying to convince Spud to let's just take the money and go. And Spud's too scared of Begbie. So it's like, what's going on? And Begbie's just a massive psychopath. Like, there's nothing on him. So Renton's had enough at that point.
Yeah. And then we then see them all after the hangovers, drinking and partying. They're all asleep except for one person. One person wakes up and notices everybody's asleep. And that one person is Mark Renton. And he's like, this is my opportunity to take the money. And Spud wakes up and sees him. And he's like shaking his head. He doesn't say anything, but he shakes his head no.
Right.
And he's like,
don't do it.
And he's like, see you, buddy. I'm out of here. And then we fast forward to everybody getting pissed off. Begbie's all pissed
off. Smashes the room, and then the cops show up.
But he leaves.
What I love is and Spud are just like out of here.
Yeah, he left some money for Spud in a locker, and Spud goes and finds it later on that he left him some money for not saying anything about him taking.
No, Spud did nothing wrong. And he says in voice like Begbie, he wouldn't give a shit, and then Sick Boy, if he had thought of it earlier, he would have taken the money, and then he felt bad for Spud, and that's why he decided to reward him with the money.
And also, he ended up in jail where he got off. So kind of like his way of saying, I'm sorry for what happened when you ended up in jail and I got off. So that was his way of, rewarding Spud. And then we just see him walking down
the bridge. And he's just like saying, you know what? And it's a complete I'd say contradiction, but just a juxtaposition with the first voiceover narration where he's saying, who would give a shit about choosing life and all that stuff when you got heroin? And this is like, I'm going to choose a job. I'm going to get the job. I'm going to choose life. I'm going to get the job. I'm going to get a television and all that stuff and insurance and all that stuff. And then looking ahead the day you die, and then title Trainspotting, and it's just leaves you on this like adrenaline rush even with the song and everything. It's just the best way to end the film.
Yeah, I think we're rooting for Renton the whole time, and I think
even though he's not a good character.
Yeah, even though he's not a good character, but he's got the lovable loser that you just can't. And I couldn't imagine anybody else playing him than Ewan McGregor.
Oh, no.
Once I watched the film and I saw it from the beginning to the end, I'm like, wow, what a great performance by Ewan McGregor in this film. And I'll tell you what, Danny Boyle really captured that world. And I know what I said earlier. That type of world is everywhere. Every town, every state, every country, everybody's got it. You got it in Australia. I got it here in Florida. So he really captured that world, in my opinion, perfectly. But who better to do it from Scotland than him, because he's from England. He knows that.
He's from the UK, yeah.
Yeah, he knows that world better than anybody. So, why is this film such an essential film? Or what was it about this film that made you want to nominate it and put it on the season 2 of the 52 must-see movies, and why they matter?
Well, the first time I saw this years ago now, I'd watched it just based out of just curiosity because everyone said, "Oh, this is a really, really good film, really, really great," and I was like, "Okay, I'm going to watch it." And I watched it, and I hated it. I seriously did not like it. I thought I can't relate to the characters because they take drugs, and I was kind of prude about that. And it ends kind of like, in my eyes, it ended kind of just like, or it just stopped. I wanted to see more. I wanted to see it end in like a cathartic way, and Gretton does terrible things to Tommy, and Tommy did nothing wrong, and I just felt really bad for these characters. And also, it's just very just plotless. There's no like singular plot, and so that really bugged me. And it was after just a year after that, I just decided, I just can't stop thinking about this Trainspotting, and I watched it again, and I was like, I really, really like this. And then that's when I found out T2 was coming out, and I saw the trailer for that. I was like, oh wow, this is getting interesting. And so I watched Trainspotting again, and that's when I realized I watched it with friends, and we all agreed that this is just a great movie, and I really, really loved it. And I just started becoming obsessed with everything. And then, of course, I saw T2, and that made me really enjoy Trainspotting even more. Just seeing it again in new eyes with what happens, and then, of course, seeing it a week ago, it just made me appreciate this film more. And I think that's what really works for the film, because it just has so many layers that you will miss on your first watch, with the characters, with what happens, and I really, really like that. And it also just helped. And also just culturally, it was one of the first drug films that just looked at it from the other viewpoint. Because before then, we had like Reefer Madness and a bunch of drug films that just was like, drugs are bad, you can't do this sort of stuff. And then Trainspotting and like Basketball Diaries and Fear Loathing was like, let's look at it from the users, who takes the drugs and their experience and why they take drugs. And I think that's really culturally significant. And also, it was just one of the first independent. It was the 90s, and it was really the big age for independent cinema. And Trainspotting is one of the biggest British films ever made, and it's got everything that is culturally significant about it, from the UK setting, the actors, their breakout roles, and the director and the producer and writing. They went off to make films, and it's just, yeah, it's a good starting point for just drug movies. And it's hyper stylized, and 90s, we hadn't really seen that before, and it has a lot of UK influence, and I think that's why a lot of people love it.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I've been meaning to watch it for years now, and just haven't got around to it. So when I saw it on the list, I was like, you know what, I'm going to watch this movie. And I wanted to talk to you about, because I knew you would bring something to the conversation, and that's the whole thing. We're having a conversation about this movie, and you really showed me your love of it, and the influence of why it is such a great film in your opinion. And now that I've watched it, I definitely want to go and watch Trainspotting 2 now. And I told you I meant to watch it like 3 times already. I missed my screening last year. Around this time, I had a screening of Trainspotting 2, and I missed it. But I'm gonna definitely watch Trainspotting 2. But I would definitely. I'm a big fan of Danny Boyle, and like I said, the cast, and a lot of folks. You know, one thing I heard about this film that I didn't have a problem with, but there is subtitles. But people say when you watch Trainspotting, they can't understand what the people are saying. See, I've been watching a movie for so long. It has to be really crazy dialogue for me not to like Snatch was and Brad Pitt.
Snatch with Brad Pitt, yeah.
That was brutal. That was really tough. But these guys, I can understand what they were saying in the movie.
Yeah, there's a couple of things. So there's one where when Bigby is retelling the story of the pool game that he has, and I think originally when they recorded the dialogue, he was just too thick with the accent, or just the dialect, and so they had to re-record it and make it easier for American audiences to understand. So I think that's the main thing. Anything with Begbie, some of it can be hard, but I think after that scene you can really tell. But there's also like the
Spud.
The Spud, yeah, a little bit, yeah, and then Sicko and Ren, they're fine. But like, there's also the nightclub scene where the music's just so loud they have the subtitles, which also works because there's just a lot of films where the nightclub sounds just is so low, Just think of, there's also the scene from like The Social Network and that nightclub scene where it's really loud and you can still understand people. With Trainspotting, they just have subtitles and it still works.
Yeah, so I love the subtitles. I love that these guys really had Scottish brogues and they really had that accent, which brought you into the story more because it really, you knew you were where you were in the time period and what you were in. But I just want to say thanks again, Jake, for nominating this film, and I was glad to have this conversation about Trainspotting.
Is there one more thing we can talk about?
Okay, sure. What's up?
I'd like to risk. I think it's the biggest selling point for Trainspotting, and that's the soundtrack. It's probably my favorite soundtrack, consisting of music of all time. Every song from the soundtrack is just some of my favorites. I'll just go through. You got Lust for Life. You got Deep Blue Day. The Atomic, Temptation, Nightclubbing, Sing, Perfect Day, Miles End, For What You Dream Of, 2 to 1, Final Hit. And then my favorite song from the entire film, and one of my favorite songs of all time, Born Slippy. And then, of course, it just ends the end credits with Closet Romantic. And the music really helps set the tone and the setting for Trainspotting, because the first half of the film, it's 70s music. It's Louis Reed, it's Iggy Pop. And then it starts becoming those 90s Britpop kind of music with Blur and Pulp. And then, of course, it ends like the last 30 minutes. It's just the techno 90s music like Bedrock and Ice MC and Underworld. And it really just shows like the era and how music is changing, because there's a scene with Diane where she's talking about everything's changing, music's changing, culture's changing. And that just shows the eventual, I guess, the character arc of Retton and how he changes, because the 70s music was very much drug heavy. And of course, that leads into the 90s music where he's at his lowest, and then of course the techno music that just was so popular in the 90s.
Yeah.
I think the music really sells it, and that's something Boyle has been perfect at with a lot of his other films.
Absolutely, the music is he really has done a great job with the setting and the different kinds of music and the different kinds of composers that he does. He adds to his different movies. And you're right.
Sorry, go on. You hear 1 second of Lust for Life, and it's just immediately I'm thinking of Trainspotting.
Yeah, no, that great song. Great song.
Trainspotting.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I noticed that right off the bat with the music that you really got into the film with the music, and good films do have a good soundtrack and good music songs that are in the film.
And all that. Yeah.
You know, one of my favorites is Goodfellas has got great
Goodfellas.
Goodfellas. So, all right, so Jake, where can you be found?
You can find me on Twitter at Pretentious Hack. The P and the H are capped. I'm also on Facebook at Jake Maringoni if you want to have a talk, or if I know you, we can be friends. I'm also on Letterboxd. If you search my name, I think you can just find the link on Twitter. I'm also on the Jack of All Trivia YouTube page. That's it's been kind of inspired by the movie Trivia Schmodown, which I'm a big fan of. Recently just got a bunch of shirts from them, so I'd like to support them. I'm also on There Will Be Trivia. I'm in the team tournament. And also you can just find me on all the other places. I'm going to be on the That Made Your List podcast, and I'm looking forward to that. So, yeah, thank you so much for having me, Dan. This is a lot of fun. I'm happy to talk about this, and I can't wait to be on the next episode.
Oh, no, I'm glad to have you, Jake. I knew you were going to bring a lot of real smart dialogue and smart, intelligent comments and whatnot. That's why I asked you to join me in the season 2 of the 52 must-see movies and why they matter. You can find me at Dan Skip Allen on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Pinterest. And once again, season 2 of the 52 must-see movies and why they matter will be on the Full Metal Media YouTube and Facebook pages. You can also see the episodes on my page. If you want to see older episodes from season 1, you can go to the Best Damn Movie Show channel, and we're going to be in process of moving all those episodes over to Full Metal Media as well. So for Jake and myself, good night.